You want to get those two straight. Mastoid process. Let's see, the sphenoid bone. Sphenoid and the ethmoid. You know those now. But the sphenoid bone is an internal bone in the skull. And from the outside of the skull, all you can see is just this little area of the sphenoid. It's actually, if you studied the sphenoid last night, it's actually sort of the margins of the greater wings, where it sort of is external on the skull. So that's the sphenoid bone there. When you look at the eye socket, and this is not a good picture for it, they always, and it's true, one of the small bones which forms the orbit of the eye actually is the ethmoid bone. You can see it's in green. It's tucked way back in there behind the lacrimal bone. Yeah, it is, but I've never on an exam ever tried to get a piece of clay on it in the orbit of the eye and go, what's that bone? I just always use the sphenoid bones we have that, you looked at last night. Another one that many of you didn't see, if you didn't have the correct skull, you had to look at a skeleton, is the lacrimal bone. It's this bone right here. It's very fragile. It's got a little groove in it called the nasolacrimal groove. And in many of our skulls, it's so fragile it's gone missing for years. I've never asked the question, name the missing bone, although you probably would figure it out. But that's where the lacrimal bone is there. And the other one I want to point out, and you can feel this on yourself pretty easily, is the supraorbital foramen. It's this little, it's like right here. You feel a little notch right here in the frontal bone, and that's where various blood vessels and nerves kind of go into your forehead and stuff like that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, now this one's a good one. There's the supraorbital foramen. One of the things which isn't, I think it's not on this picture, but I asked in my study guide is this thing called the superciliary arch, which just picture where your eyebrows are, right? It's the brow ridge right here, this raised portion right above the orbit of the eye. That's the superciliary arch, right? There and right there, and there's the little foramen right there. Looking in the, are both of them labeled on here? They really aren't, but anyway, it's okay. Looking in the nose here of this skull, there are three bones called the nasal concha bones, or the turbinate bones. But there's three, but I only asked two. You can see one right here, which is the inferior nasal concha. The next higher one up, which is not actually labeled on this diagram, but it's in green and is actually part of the ethmoid bone, is the middle nasal concha. And you can see that it's on a few of our skulls, and it's definitely on the skeletons. There's a third called the superior nasal concha, which again is part of the ethmoid bone, but I don't try to test on it because it's just kind of too hard to find. And although I don't like this view, this bone right here, kind of like right here at the bottom of your nose, is the vomer. And the vomer means plow. And it continues all the way back sort of under the hard palate. I kind of like the inferior view of the skull that showed that one. But there's some good stuff in here. Superior orbital fissure, inferior orbital fissure, the optic canal. So this little fissure right here is in the sphenoid bone. The optic canal is also in the sphenoid bone. But the inferior orbital fissure is actually in the maxilla. And to see those, you just take a skull and kind of look in the eye socket. You'll see one top slit and one bottom slit. The bottom one's inferior orbital fissure, the top one's the superior. So you know superior and inferior, that's how you find it. So it's a pretty good picture, and we don't do the mental foramen or any of that kind of stuff, but pretty good. Oh, yeah, here it is. I kind of like this view. So this gray bone right here. I like this one better, the view of the vomer right there. I like that one. A lot of people ask me, well, not a lot, but enough that I'll mention it, ask me about the palatine bone. It's in orange. In yellow right here, it's sort of the back of the hard palate. This is called the palatal process of the maxilla. We're not interested in that, but this is the palatine bone right back there. Obviously, the foramen magnum. The little white structures on both sides of the foramen magnum are occipital condyles. We'll talk about those tonight because the first cervical vertebrae articulates right there. C1 articulates on the occipital condyles. Condyle means knuckle. Also, this is the view I like, and I had several questions about this last night. The book uses a temporal bone to illustrate the carotid canal and the jugular fissure. I don't like the temporal bone as that example. You certainly can't see it, but it's not my favorite way to show it. I just like to do it on a skull, and I know I showed it to this group right in front of me. So here's the carotid canal. It's usually nice and round. right? It is part of the temporal bone, but it's hard to see when you just have a temporal bone in your hand. So here's the carotid canal, and then, oh, they call it the foramen. I sometimes call it a fissure because some of the books do it. And then, so here's the carotid canal, and then right behind it, there's another somewhat jagged opening, and we'll go with the name I have on here, the jugular foramen. So you could just, you don't need to know anything about the circulatory system to know that there's a carotid artery and a jugular vein, are two major blood vessels, up here in our neck. Well, they enter and leave through these two holes, the carotid and the jugular. And you can see the xyloid process next to it, so that's pretty good.